I'm Des Caminos, and in 2014, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, also known as BPD. I remember sitting in my therapist's office in a little green seat when he gave me the diagnosis, and my first thought was, what? And my second thought was, I knew I wasn't crazy. As my therapist read off the symptoms of borderline personality disorder, I felt so seen, so understood, as if I wasn't alone in the world. My therapist also told me to make sure that when I left his office to not look this up on my phone. He said there was still a lot of stigma around BPD and it wasn't properly represented in the media. So I left his office with a newfound hope for life. I was excited. I was ready to face the world with this newfound understanding of who I was as a person. So as I got to the parking lot and stepped into my car, the AC hit my face and I felt so alive. And then I grabbed my phone and looked up borderline personality disorder. Have you ever done that? Have you ever done something that maybe you shouldn't do? And while you're doing it, you're like, what have I done? Because that was very much me. I read that I was a monster with no effective treatments, that there was no medication that could help. I read that I was crazy, that I was erratic, that I was psychotic. Take a breath. That flickering hope of light that I had was completely snuffed out, and I was feeling empty once again, with a deeper sense of despair and hopelessness. The only things that I could find in the media, any references of are there people like me, was the movie Gone Girl. Great movie, super scary sense of self. You see, being borderline is like being made up of eggshells. It's tough enough to protect what's inside, but fragile enough that even the gentlest touch can make us feel like we're about to break completely open. I really struggled with borderline personality disorder symptoms. I had a difficult time managing my emotional triggers. I was extremely reactive. I jumped from unhealthy relationship to unhealthy relationship because I didn't feel safe being alone. I didn't trust myself to be alone. My thought patterns were so destructive. My inner critic voice was so loud. I engaged in self harm and self destructive behaviors. I just knew that I had to do something to escape the perceived reality that I was in. So I binge drank. I had promiscuous sex. I did drugs. I did all of it in hopes of trying to numb myself to the pain that I was feeling. And one day I remember sitting on a dirty theater floor covered in stale beer and popcorn in a drunken stupor and just thinking to myself, what am I doing with my life? Is this going to be the rest of my life? Can I keep living like this? And honestly, do I want to? It was a really difficult place for me to be, and not just because I was so drunk, but because sitting there, laying there on that floor, I realized I was covered in shame and guilt and despair, and I had to do something. So in the morning when I woke up, I took action. I decided I wasn't going to be one of those statistics of borderline personality disorder, of people who just stayed in that state of mania. Did you know that 1.6 Americans have been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder? I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's over 5 million Americans. And of those 5 million Americans, up to 10% die by suicide. Those are numbers that don't have to be that high. Those are numbers that don't have to be numbers. Those numbers are people just like me. People who have a difficult time processing the symptoms and the lifestyle of borderline personality disorder. People who, like me, we're looking for an escape and looking for a deeper sense of connection and understanding, wanting people to be aware of who we are as people, not just who we are because of a disorder. And I'm so grateful because not only did I challenge that statistic within myself, but it's been 5 years since I've had symptoms of being borderline personality disorder. Day by day, week by week, I pulled myself off of that dirty theater floor, and now I get to empower other women to master their emotional triggers and silence their inner critic. Thank you so much for considering my story, because the truth is, my story is our experience. We are all in this together. So thank you once again for considering my story to raise awareness to borderline personality disorder, to let people know that there is hope. There is a light. It doesn't just have to be monsters trying to escape reality. We get to be people living in a world where people understand us. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I know that together we radiate. Together, we rise.